And now that I've been there for a long time, I more recently have seen the growth because I'm managing people. And so to see people who were where I was, 5 or 6 years ago, and for me to share my learnings with them has been probably the most rewarding part of the job so far.
Welcome to the Game of Her Own podcast, a podcast about women who work in sports. I'm your host, Jahaan Blake. After 15 years of working for 3 major league teams, including the Boston Red Sox, Los Angeles Dodgers, and the Chicago Cubs, I discovered the one thing I loved the most was helping women in sports shatter glass ceilings and take their seat at the table. I loved it so much that I made a business out of it. I have the honor of coaching high-performing women in the sports and entertainment industry and supporting them as they go after exactly what they want in their career. So if you are feeling tired of waiting on the sidelines, done being overlooked for promotions, and you're ready to pull ahead of the pack and take your career to the next level, girl, I'm here for it. I also created the Game of Her Own podcast to support you as well. We are here to share the stories of incredible women who work in sports and entertainment. These leaders and trailblazers will inspire you with their success and the lessons they've learned along the way to the top. Ladies, there is nothing like women empowering women. I am so honored you're here. I love hearing the stories of women who started at a company as an intern and are now executives. That's exactly the career path of my next guest. Alyssa Romano started her career with Octagon as an intern, and fast forward 11 years, she is now the vice president of communications. My conversation with Alyssa felt like a little mini masterclass. We talk about things like what it was like growing up professionally in an organization, how she led a team for the very first time, how networking has played a crucial part in her growth, and the work Octagon is doing in the diversity and inclusion space. I will say one thing, working from home is still a thing, which means sometimes we have background noise. You may hear some things here and there during our conversation, but it's nothing y'all can't handle. We'll just blame it on COVID. We'll continue to do that for like the next year, right? That can be our excuse for things like this. All right, friends, let's do this. Alyssa, welcome to the Game of Her Own podcast. I am so glad you're here.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. Okay. Before we dive into your amazing career and you inspire all of us, take us way back in time and tell us when you first fell in love with sports.
So my dad actually was a coach when I was growing up. So he coached high school football and he played football in college. So my first sports memory, I guess, was my first Halloween when I was dressed as a football player. And my dad also gave me a bowl haircut because my mom wasn't around to take me to the proper hair place. So I went to a men's barbershop. But yeah, sports has always been a part of my life. I was a college athlete. I truly don't know what my life would be like without sports. So yeah, my earliest memories are definitely from my dad and is stemmed throughout.
I love it. You were a football player for Halloween.
Yes. So it's a New York Giants football player with a bowl haircut. So it was, the pictures are pretty great. My next Halloween, I was Dorothy. So I got to pick my costume the second time around.
How old were you with that bowl haircut and football uniform?
I think I was 3. My mom was not pleased.
I'm sure she got a lot of, oh, your son's so cute.
Yeah. Yep. It's always funny because my first memorable birthday gift, I got Hot Wheels and my mom got me a Barbie and I love my Hot Wheels. And I was such a tomboy growing up. So a lot of my family members are like, it's no wonder why you work in sports. But I've always loved sports. It's just been a part of my life.
What did you play in college?
Lacrosse.
Ah, okay. Very good.
Yeah, I played field hockey and lacrosse in high school. And then probably my freshman year of high school really focused in on lacrosse and did travel and all that kind of stuff. And then I played at American University in DC.
Yeah, very good. All right. Do you miss it?
Yes, I do. A lot. I miss just being part of a team. And you kind of get that aspect working in this industry, but I miss the different like classes and, having leaders to look up to strive to mentor. So it's, I try to carry that into my work, but I miss it a lot.
And when did you realize, okay, I'm done with sports, playing sports, but I want to work in sports? Like when did you have that realization that you could have a job and work in the sports and entertainment industry?
So my junior year, I think I started interning in the athletic communications office at American, mostly because it was the only thing that fit with my practice schedule. And they understood that and understood that I could come into the office at 6 a.m., go to lift at 7 a.m. and come back at 9 a.m. and I would get all my hours in. But I didn't really understand until, so I went to Georgetown for my sports management master's. And honestly, I kind of stumbled into that because lacrosse is a spring sport and I didn't really have time to look for a job. I thought winning a Patriot League championship was more important than finding a career at that time. So I went to Georgetown for a year thinking that I would just figure it out. And it worked out for me. And I learned about all these different paths in sports and it was great. My eyes were open to a lot of different possibilities I didn't really know about before.
Wait, so say that again. You went to Georgetown so you could continue to play?
I went to Georgetown to give myself another year to figure out what I wanted to do. I wanted to stay in DC, but I had no idea what I wanted to do. And the Georgetown program, they were looking for people. And the dean actually used to work at American. And he called me, said, "What are you doing this, when you're done at AU?" And I was like, "I actually really don't know." He's like, "Come to Georgetown." I'm like, "Okay, that sounds good." That's what happened.
I always tell people, I'm like, I went like, "Oh, did you make the decision to go get your master's? Because you wanted to get your master's." And it was like this big pivotal moment. I was like, actually, I didn't know what I wanted to do yet. So I hadn't figured it out. So I just kept going to school.
Yeah. And I definitely recognize how fortunate I am, right? I was able to afford that and my parents would help me with that. Mm-hmm. I didn't have to right away go look for a job. And so definitely blessed in that regard. But I thought of that time as just giving myself another year without sports, like playing sports, to really think about it. Because especially as a D1 athlete, you're so ingrained in your sports life. And it's hard to think about anything else really outside of that.
Yeah, for me, it was worth all the loans. It worked out. And if I didn't go get my master's, I wouldn't have ended up working for the Red Sox, and all those things wouldn't have happened after. So for me, it was worth the loans and definitely worth that just extra time. It's okay if you don't know what you want to do.
Yeah.
Like right after college. Like, I don't feel like that's realistic sometimes, and it's okay if you do know, go for it. But if you don't, take your time.
Exactly. Yeah. And I didn't. So it worked out and I'm glad I did it.
Yes. Tell everybody what you do now and who you do it for.
So I work at Octagon. We are one of the biggest and probably most historic sports agencies globally. I handle PR for our athletes. So that really spans the gamut. I do some NBA, WNBA, NHL, MLB, a little Olympic work. So I oversee storytelling for our clients, essentially, really trying to share who they are on or off the court, field, or ice, and giving our marketers really the opportunity to reach out to brands, to have media that talks about things that brands are interested in so that they want to work with our clients in the future. So I've been there my whole career. Actually, September will be 11 years, which it's very crazy to think about because sometimes I still feel like I'm new there, but I love it. And I work with great clients and great people.
Okay. So you started as an intern there for 11 years, and now you're the vice president of communications.
Yes.
Talk a little bit about that journey. I mean, just starting somewhere as an intern and having the influence and the courage to kind of just go after what you want. And 11 years later, have people recognize you as an executive on the team. Like, what is that like?
I don't know. I don't really think about it too much, mostly because you're just doing it. But I do remember when I, right? Like,
I like that. Yeah.
I just keep growing and it's just part of every day. But I'd say when I got my full-time offer, I do remember going into my boss at the time, into her office, and she'd be like, "Hey, I had this whole thing prepared about why I think I should work here." And I had like all my bullet points and my stats, and I was like ready. And I was like, I started the conversation and she was, "I'm just going to stop you. I just want to let you know, we're going to offer you a job." And I was like, "Oh, okay." Like, great. But I was ready for it. But what was interesting is like, there was no path for me. It was very much like, we really like you. We don't really know exactly what you're going to do, but we'll figure it out. And so for me, that type of work environment I thrive in. There's some people who need a little bit more, say, structure, and I didn't have that, and that was okay. So I basically figured out like where there were holes. At the time, social media was like really starting to grow, and so I latched onto that. And now that I've been there for a long time, I more recently have seen the growth because I'm managing people. And so to see people who where I was, 5 or 6 years ago, and for me to share my learnings with them has been probably the most rewarding part of the job so far.
Talk about that a little bit more, leading a team, especially when you first, right? Like, because you started as an intern, so you had your first experience leading a team at some point during your, career. What was that like, leading a team for the first time?
So I was a captain on my team at American. And so what I found during lacrosse that I applied in business is that you really want to empower the people that work for you. So I went out of my way consistently to make sure that everyone who worked for me felt supported, felt heard, and giving them opportunities that maybe they weren't exactly ready for yet, but that I would trust them with and would be there to support them. So giving them access to clients that when I was in that position, I didn't get, but wish I would have had those chances. And so through all of that, just watching people grow and learn, and now trying to figure out, okay, now how do I keep that going for them in their careers, and then keeping them to stay, because it is very competitive in our business, has been, again, one of the more rewarding, but also challenging parts of growing up in the sports world or in business in general.
Yeah, I always say that. I'm like, I grew up professionally at the Red Sox. Okay, so tell us, what was the most challenging aspect of like managing someone for the first time? So I asked that for people who are listening, who are like, okay, I really want to lead a team, but I have no idea what I'm doing. And some people are afraid to go after that because they don't, all the uncertainty that comes along with it. So is there like a big challenge, or like, I don't know, like a favorite failure that you've had along the way of managing a team?
I'd say the biggest challenge has been letting go of stuff. So like things that I would work on and that like I've grown out of, right? I don't need to be writing client bios anymore, or, sending local level pitches. There are people that should be able to, that can do that and handle it. So letting go of that and not micromanaging that was a big challenge for me. And now I'm like, you're off and running, go see ya. Like I've gotten over that, but it took me like 2 years to do that. So that was a pretty big challenge. And then also just like time management and making sure that I'm giving the people who work for me enough time of my day so that they feel like they're learning and growing and are being heard, but then I'm also getting my own work done, because there's only so many hours of the day. And so I've had to adjust my schedule to make sure that I'm managing, right? That's a job. And making sure that time is budgeted out for that during the week.
That's a huge lesson in having like boundaries. How do you like set them? Because you have to be there for your team. You want to inspire, motivate your team, coach them, hold them accountable. But then it's also like, I got to actually do my job as well and make sure, you know what I mean? Like, and you're accountable to someone else. How do you like set those boundaries? What advice would you give women who are trying to be everything to everyone on their team?
That you can't. And really recognizing that. It's setting time aside, for me, at least, it's okay, during this 2-hour block, like I'm a manager. And so my focus is all on the people who work for me. There are people who, that's their sole job is managing, but that's, for me, it's still like answering client calls and dealing with media and that kind of stuff. So it's really just setting aside time to focus on the people who work for you. I'd say quarterly, I do a check-in, weekly check-ins, but quarterly for like more goal evaluating. Right? Like, where are you? Where do you want to be? As we get to like our 1 year review, are we where we're supposed to be? And then I also find, one of my bosses taught me this too, is about asking for raises and promotions. And so I always tell the people who work for me, like, okay, I'm going to ask for this, but in order to ask for this for you, I need you to do X, Y, Z. So I set that up at the beginning and consistently check in with people to see where we're at, so that when I'm going to our president to ask for a bonus or a raise for the people who work for me, I have all of the stepping stones that they've done throughout the year. And also the people that work for me know that open communication. That's something else that I've learned and established with the people that I work with.
Yes. I think that's great advice. You're setting expectations, you're delegating for sure, you're trusting in your team. And then you do quarterly reviews.
I would say quarterly check-ins. Daily we're talking, but there's time that, again, I set aside that's like, okay, let's talk about how far we are now from the goals we set. And like when I go and ask for whatever you need at the end of the year, that we are progressing to a place where we're all going to feel comfortable and hopefully get what we're asking for.
I wish that we worked together. Like you were my manager when I was growing up professionally. Like I tell people now all the time, I say quarterly reviews, but quarterly check-ins, same thing, right? Like it just helps you have an understanding of where you stand. And it's so easy to get, like, put your head down, go do your work, and then look up and it's like, wait, a year has gone by already. Like I lost sight of this one goal that I had because we were so, you know what I mean, heavily focused on something. And it just gives you a chance to pivot and course correct, and just it's inspiring too to see how far you've come in like a short 3 months as well.
Yeah, exactly. It's nice to be like, oh, well, this is what we did then. Here's where we're at now. Like little goals help the big goal, and it helps your self-esteem and it keeps you motivated. So yeah, and I would say sometimes I'm more organized for those, and other times I'm definitely not. Like, just talking about like, okay, this is what we talked about last time, shoot me a quick email. And other times I'm like, here's a full document of all the things we talked about. So, and the people who work with me usually know when things are going to be a little bit more written out, focused, buttoned up, and when things are going to be like, okay, we're still doing our check-in, right? Because that's important, but it's in a different structure. It's a little bit more casual. There's more open dialogue. It just depends on the time of year and what's going on in the sports calendar, which these days is always going on. Something's always happening. So,
Yeah.
Just trying to figure it all out.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. And is there something that someone on your team does that helps you, right, for these quarterly check-ins? Like, is something that they bring to you or how they structure it that helps you, like, help them? Does that make sense?
Yeah. I mean, after every one, I'm like, send me a recap of what we talked about, right? And I put it on them. Because, it's on them, right? At the end of the day to do what they need to do to get where they want to be. And two, it just helps me stay organized. That's also a big part of my team, is keeping me organized and keeping me going. And same thing for them, but we're all moving so fast. Yeah, putting that back on them also holds everyone accountable.
Yeah, I like that. The recap, it's something so simple, but just having that in writing and being able to reference it whenever you need it, like it's so helpful. And it helps hold both sides accountable, which is nice. Okay, so being with the same company for 11 years, how are you learning from like other industries, or just like learning from an outside perspective? Was that a focus of yours?
Yeah, it's hard. That also takes a lot of time. And like, similar to the same way I was saying, you set time aside to do stuff. You have to set time aside for that. So Octagon is part of the Octagon Sports Entertainment Network, which basically is a conglomerate of agencies, all part of the IPG network. And so within OSIN, Octagon Sports Entertainment, there's an agency, Rogers and Cowan, PMK. And so they focus more PR for entertainment, music, lifestyle. And so there are a couple colleagues there that I learn a lot from daily. I think dealing with PR, it's really about learning through other people's experiences, right? There's no like rule book on what to do and what not to do. Everything is case by case. There are very different problems or successes on a celebrity entertainment level that I might face day to day. So learning from them, their strategies, their network too, has been really, really helpful for me.
Okay, so I'm hearing sort of like an internal networking, is if I got that right, if I followed that.
Yeah, internal, I guess I would say, right? They're a totally different agency, but we all kind of boil up into the same umbrella. I learn from my colleagues every single day, my Octagon colleagues. I would say my network internally is really strong, but just asking my colleagues questions to things that I just don't know. And I'm always one to be like, I don't know what you're talking about. Can you please explain that to me 11 years later, especially when it comes to like expense reports and stuff. I'm like, how do we code that? But I've developed a pretty good group of other women in the sports space, whether that's at Octagon or other agencies or media companies, that we constantly group chat, ask each other questions. It's very collaborative and really helpful.
One thing I know for sure is it can be exhausting and emotionally draining as you go after what you want in your career. Maybe you're ready for the next level, but you're not sure how to get there. Maybe you're not sure how to use your voice to grow your career, or you just don't feel seen and heard in your organization. And I don't want you to have to go at it alone. It is why I'm putting together a small group of women for the Be Seen and Heard at Work group coaching experience. If you are tired of things just going okay, this group may be for you. If you're ready to use your voice to influence change, speak truth to power, build your brand, and advocate for yourself without feeling like you're bragging, this group is for you. Enrollment opens soon. So in the meantime, I invite you to join the waiting list. Be the first to hear more about the program and also when more spots open up. You probably already know this, but it's worth saying. There is something so powerful about women empowering women, and that's exactly what you'll get in this program. Coaching and accountability from me, and the support and empowerment from other women in this group. If this sounds like the right fit for you, head to the show notes and join the waiting list for the Be Seen and Heard at Work group coaching program. All right, let's get back to the episode. Okay, so I'm hearing networking is key for you, and that's both internal and external, and you kind of have it in different platforms. So you're not maybe you don't have a lot of time, right? None of us do. So for you, it's probably at your level, your internal networking, but then you just have a group chat and we'll text people because that's that's the quickest way. You can pop in a question and come back a day later if you wanted to see what people said. It just makes it a little bit quicker and easier.
We used to have a Slack channel, a bunch of us, and I don't know why that died. It just moved over to text, honestly, but it's helpful. Again, we just shoot things across, get people's quick takes. If I have something a little bit more detailed, I'll call one of them, but the group text it's always going off.
Yes. Yeah. It's just nice to have that support and know that other people are going through similar things and have a safe place to ask questions. And I really like what you said is you don't know all the answers. Some things I don't know and I'm going to ask, even if it's expense reports, but even if it's work related, the curiosity is the easiest way to learn and to grow. And it doesn't matter what level, intern or vice president.
I always ask because that's the way you learn, right? It's always asking, like you said, being more curious. So I'm never afraid to raise my hand.
And I imagine that's such a good example for the people who are working for you, right? They see you being vulnerable, and I view it as a moment of vulnerability, asking, for more clarity on something, getting curious about something that's going on and trying to really understand what you're working on. And then if your team sees that, then they're like, oh, well, she doesn't have all the answers either. She's not this, you know what I mean? Superhuman.
There are so many times where someone's how do I do this? I'm I don't know, ask them. I always say, just ask. And it's really just that simple. Just ask. And I try to empower people to think that way and do that.
Yeah, I remember a manager first time asked, I said something and she's like, just Google it. And I was like, we're working on multi-million-dollar deals here. This is when I was outside of sports for my short stint for a year at Deloitte. And I was like, Google it. Well, okay. But it just seemed like the magic answer was supposed to come from something. No, it was as simple as Google. And I just kind of laughed. I was like, oh, well, I feel silly now. And went to Google and figured it out. And it was that simple.
Yeah, we're very lucky to have that, right? And the access to that information. And I remember, again, when I first started, I didn't have half of that stuff, or, the internet wasn't as robust as it is now. And the power of Google, especially in our job, is tremendous. So I understand that too.
Google, as someone called it the other day, I'm sure everyone does this, but it's the first time I heard it, Google University. And I was like, yeah, that's, that's it.
Whenever we had our interns, and when I was managing interns earlier on in my career, if there was something that I got back that people had questions about, did you Google it? It's really that simple, like you said earlier. But if it's going that extra step, Googling it to them as much as you can, trying to figure things out, because you really can, right? Everything is kind of at your fingertips now. And so I often asked that question before anything was presented to me or questions were asked.
Yeah. And I don't want to date myself, but there's no Google when I first started in sports in 2003. There was, or maybe there was, but it wasn't to the extent that it is now, where you can type in, literally type in the question and be like, oh my God, look at all these answers.
Right. Or it's writing a bio, again, on the PR side. Well, I don't know this information. Did you research? Did you Google? Did you look on the team website? Did you look on their college website? Just stuff like that. It's all at your fingertips now. Makes it a little bit easier.
All right. Somebody who wants to become they see your title and they've heard what the work that you do at Octagon, and that's their goal. Say they're at any level, right? They can be an intern, they could be a director, knocking on the door of being an executive. What advice would you give them on getting to that executive level?
We talked a little bit about networking before. I think one thing that I really pride myself on was networking internally. So there's a lot of emphasis about building your network externally, and I think that's really important. But for me, it was really spending the time to getting to know our executives. And I have direct access to our president and to our CMO. And that started even after my second year at Octagon. I spent time to set up meetings with them, to grab coffees with them, and to find out more about them outside of work. And that really helped me grow. I want to say it's like a communications path, just in general, as you're trying to rise through the ranks, is really spending the time and making the effort to get to know the people in your company above you was really valuable for me.
Again, like, not to simplify it, but it's that simple. Knock on someone's door, just get to know somebody. Don't be afraid. I always talk about having allies. So don't be afraid to just knock on someone's door and pop. Sometimes you don't need to have like an official email. Like, can you meet at this time? Like maybe you walk by and you see someone's kind of just like on their, like, putzing around on their phone. You could tell when someone's like not in the zone. That's maybe when you kind of just pop in. I used to love when that would happen to me. I would hate it when I was in the zone and someone didn't read the room, but like you could tell when someone's not, just popping in and talk and having a conversation.
And I used to stay my like first 3 years, I was Octagon, I think I stayed in the office till like 8:00 a lot of nights. And that was oftentimes so when some of our executives were there and were free and were not on the phone or in meetings. And I would just pop in and just say, hi, how are you doing? And oftentimes it led to a bigger discussion. Sometimes it'd be like, I'm good, see you later, good night. But other times it opened the door. So I knew kind of the right times to be there and to check in and that kind of stuff. And it helped a lot.
Yeah. And it sounds like if someone said, I got to go, like, I don't have time for this. Like it didn't stop you from doing it again.
Right. I think it was asked, what's your superpower in your job? And I think for me, it's communicating and be able to read people and understanding when people want to talk, when they don't want to talk, how to communicate at various levels, whether that's with an executive or a 15-year-old basketball player or their parents, right? It's really different. So just knowing how to do that and reading body language.
Yeah, reading body language. I like that. What other advice would you give? Because you're right, talking to a 15-year-old, their parents, and talking to an executive are two different things, especially an executive you report into. Like what advice would you give there on the communication side? Because this is your wheelhouse. And for some of us, it is not. So what advice would you give?
Be yourself. That's one. Just, I try to always, I'm very friendly. I'm very open. I try to bring that into every conversation, just structure it a little bit differently. But I think at the end of the day, communicating is the most important skill that you can have in business, and being able to effectively communicate. Public speaking as well, I think is really, really important. So just practicing that. But the president of our company to the intern in our company, they all want to be treated with respect. And they want everyone to be nice, right? You want to be nice to people. I think that goes really, really far and is underappreciated.
Yeah, that's thinking about how you would want to be treated.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
And just putting on their shoes for just a couple of minutes before you go talk to somebody goes a long way as well. Yeah. Like, okay, you might not have a 15-year-old, so you might not understand, but you can think about it. Mm-hmm. Right. You can even Google it. What is it like to have a 15-year-old? But just thinking about it and just talking to someone like you would want to be, or treating someone like you would want to be treated. I think
exactly.
Okay, so let's think back to the past year, the racial awakening that's happened in our country. And I'd love to hear from what the work you do and what Octagon's been doing in the diversity and inclusion space. And it could be things that you've changed in the past year or things that you've been doing, all along for your whole career.
Yeah. So I'll start first with some things that Octagon has been doing, and probably the most recent thing. We launched an HBCU Accelerator program. So we put out a call for applicants, 20 applicants from HBCU undergrad schools, to do a 2-week immersive course in talent representation. So what we found is a lot of students thought in order to work in sports, you had to be an athlete. And so we tried to create a program that showed all the different parts of athlete representation, whether that's an agent, a publicist, marketing, finance, entertainment management, right? What does it all look like? So it's a program we're really proud of. It kicks off in July and ends with a trip to DC, where the students will go to a Nationals game and kind of see the inner workings over there. But creating that program from the ground up was a result of everything that's been going on the past year and really refocusing our D&I efforts and where do we want to be and what places do we want to play in and how do we really come together to create something really about action and driving results. So that would be internal at Octagon.
HBCU Accelerator. I love that.
I talked a little bit about some of the people that I work with, and one of the girls I manage really, really took that under her wing. And so for me, it was really empowering her to like own it and run with it. And however I could help her, whether that was wrangling in some executives or helping her navigate internally who was going to speak on the program or who she should reach out to. But it's been amazing to see her grow and really own something and something that she's so passionate about. So I'm really excited for it to kick off in July.
So when it comes to just the space and like the athletes that you work with, how has the past year impacted you all?
I mean, it was really heavy. It was a lot.
Sure. You know what? It sure was. I'm glad you said that because I take a moment for everyone just to be like, gosh, that was a lot last year. And I was talking with another guest a couple of weeks ago and we were just like, man, that was a tough time for everybody who took that moment to like dive into it and like really understand what was happening, what was going on, and what that meant to them personally, even for me.
It was a lot. And I learned a lot through our athletes. Sometimes mostly our younger athletes, I'd say they had a lot they wanted to say, but didn't know how they wanted to say it or what the best way to do so. Is it on social media? Is it through a local interview? Is it working with another athlete to do an Instagram live or something? So figuring out with our athletes what they wanted to say and the most powerful way to do so on what platform was more of like the tactical stuff that I helped work on. But honestly, just being there to listen to them and to support them and try to figure out the best ways to make sure that they felt heard. It was a lot. And I think we all learned and continue to learn every day from it. And there's a lot more work to be done. So just trying to incorporate that into whether it's brand partnerships or media obligations or their foundations has been kind of like the part 2 of that.
Yeah. And I'm stuck on the first thing you said about athletes coming to you all and not know, like having something to say, but not knowing how to say it, where to say it, like, should this be just something that's private? Like it was, and that resonated with me because that's literally how I felt, except I wasn't, not an athlete. I just was like, I want to say stuff, but where do I say it? What's the appropriate thing? Like, it's just, by the time you like go to say something, you've already like talked yourself out of it, or maybe you're not saying exactly what you're tailoring it to, I don't know, maybe not be as transparent as you want to be. And so I can only imagine for the athletes having you all as support to be able just to talk to someone about it was huge, was so valuable.
Yeah, I think so. And there's also other times where, there were clients who were doing things. I'm like, okay, we need to tell the media about this, right? You're doing all these great things. You're going to protest, you're organizing things in your local communities. And they were very much like, no, I'm just doing it. I don't need publicity for this. And also playing that balance of like, hey, this is why you should, right? Because then you're going to raise more awareness. You might be able to raise more funds, just so but that's a delicate line. And so that was another part of it all, was trying to figure out how to be pretty delicate and balanced in that regard.
Yeah, I mean, because I went just flip-flopped when you said that. You were like, oh, they don't want to do it. I'm like, oh yeah, they shouldn't have to. And then you just were like, well, if you do this, it helps, bring awareness. I was like, oh wait, that's important too. Like, and it's hard, right? Like, but having those conversations and being able to talk about something that's uncomfortable or could be perceived as uncomfortable, right? And just having to be like, well, this is why you should do it. And just having that conversation is tough. So kudos to you guys and your athletes for having those conversations.
We work with some really incredible athletes who really want to see significant change and who will use their platforms to do so and understand the power that they have, that the more than an athlete saying is just so ingrained in the clients that we work with. And it's amazing to see I remember I spoke on a panel like 5 years ago with a team executive, and we were talking about, this is actually like when Colin Kaepernick started kneeling and stuff. And the reaction, or one of the questions was like, how would you handle that? And I'm like, I would all empower that. And the team executive was very much, well, we have to make sure, we have partners and sponsors to check off, and just the change from that to now is wild.
Yeah, it really is. And I often joke that it took a global pandemic for all this to happen, but it really did. It took people that you had no choice but to slow down and listen. For those of us who were, I don't say supportive, I don't think that's the right word, but like had open hearts to hear what was going on. Like there's no avoiding it, right? Like there's no picking up. I know for me personally, when I see things that hurt and I see, things happening to people, and let's just say police brutality. Let's take that for example. For me, when I see those things, it was almost too much, and you feel powerless, and you had to keep moving. When we were working, that was easier to do because I was working and I could put my head down and just like not ignore it, but shield myself from it. Right? I guess it's a fancy way of saying ignore it. But when the pandemic hit, it was like, it is here. Yeah. Like there is nowhere to hide. There's nowhere to run. Like it's here and you have to face it. And so it's a blessing and a curse, I think.
We talked earlier too about managing and knowing the people that you work with. Like during that time, the ability, one, that Octagon gave us, but then two, just that trickling down of like, take time off. Like you need a mental health day. You need to really be able to like check out for a little bit. And especially during that time, I was constantly encouraging my colleagues to take that time. And even if it was one day a week or 2 days, whatever the case may be, but reminding them that like, it's okay to check out for a little bit and you should. So, and again, that was instilled from the top down for us.
Yeah, I love that, having that someone just to say, because, it's me over here and my, I have a few, part-time employees, but like I had to tell myself, like, take some time off. Just, you have to. Like I tried to power through and then I was like, oh, this isn't working. I just canceled the rest of my appointments for the week and just kind of just sat there. So again, it's nice to have that support, and hopefully people who are listening got to take some time as well, just to reflect. And that's important. All right. There is no natural transition from that conversation to what I'm going to ask you next, but are you ready for rapid fire questions?
I'm ready.
Okay. Ready. 12 questions. First thing that comes to mind. That's it.
Okay.
All right. What's your favorite sports moment?
I went to Super Bowl when the Patriots won last. And one of my longtime clients he broke his arm, but had an unbelievable game. And so celebrating that with him and his family is definitely up there. And then watching the Washington Mystics win their championship in 2019 will be up there too.
Good ones. Okay. What is something people always get wrong about you?
That I'm too nice.
I hear that one a lot. What is one food you wouldn't want to give up?
Cheese.
Are you a morning or a night person?
Morning.
Favorite holiday?
Memorial Day.
Oh, what job would you be absolutely horrible at doing?
Anything only behind a desk constantly. I can't. I have to like get up and be out and about.
Oh, the pandemic was not for you, huh?
Nope. That was the longest I hadn't been on a plane in years. It was tough.
That's tough. Yeah. For the introvert in me was at first was like, well, I mean, this isn't that bad. Just have to stay at home for a little while. And then obviously that was like, I thought maybe like a month, not a year plus.
Yeah. It was tricky.
Yeah. All right. What products would you seriously stockpile if you found out they were going out of business?
Do iPhones count?
Yeah.
I feel like that's like a standard answer, but my phone.
No, that is definitely the first time. That's the first time anyone's ever answered it like that. I like it. What is your favorite app?
I use the Nike app a lot just for like constant shopping and browsing.
All right.
It's funny because I often ask, like, this is the kind of questions I ask my clients. And I'm like, if you can't use social media and you can't use the Maps app, what app do you use the most? And I always ask it. Now that I'm being asked, I'm like, I have no idea.
All right. Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, or Instagram?
For what purpose? Personal or business?
Oh, good question. Since this is more about business, let's say business. Twitter. Okay. Now I want to know personal.
Instagram.
Okay. Who is your biggest inspiration in life?
My dad.
As a child, what did you wish to become when you grew up?
A marine biologist.
Did not see that coming. Okay. Finish this sentence. The future of women working in sports is
powerful.
Yes, this has been awesome and a pleasure. If someone wanted to get in touch with you or learn more about Octagon, how can they do that?
To learn more about Octagon, just go to our website or really any of our social channels at Octagon. And to learn more about me, Twitter is probably the best place at Alyssa Romano.
Awesome. Thank you so much for the time. We appreciate it.
Cool. Thank you so much for having me.
So what did you think of this episode? Do you know another woman who works or is aspiring to work in sports? Would you do me a favor and share this with them? It would mean so much if together we could support and inspire other women on their journey. And let's stay connected. I love meeting and talking to new people. Follow me on Instagram at Jahaan Blake and join the free Game of Her Own community by visiting jahaanblake.com. I can't wait to meet you.